Hey, I'm Wolf Gabriel Sablehouse, and we're out here for Flametown News, asking teenagers what the biggest threat to America is. Alright kids, so I want to know, what's the biggest threat to America right now?
Terrorism!
What's that?
You know what terrorism is. Come on, don't give me that. Come on, I know you know what it is.
No, really, guys, what is it? Is it like the Big Bang? Did Osama bin Laden do like the Big Bang?
Well, all right. Actually, according to Websterism, is the use of violence and intimidation to achieve political aims.
So would you say the extinction of dinosaurs would be considered terrorism?
Actually, the real start of terrorism in the United States can be linked back to the Massacre at the Mystic.
Massacre at the Mystic.
The Massacre at the Mystic is known as the start of the Pequot War, where English settlers under the rule of Captain John Mason brutally murdered more than 700 Pequot Indians in order to gather more land and retaliate after one English settler was killed. This massacre almost fully diminished the Pequot tribe of Native Americans and led to the Pequot War, encompassing many tribes and settlers all fighting against one another.
About 100 years later, on March 3rd of 1770, an event called the Boston Massacre occurred. Now, this was when a group of British soldiers opened fire into a group of American colonists, killing 5 and injuring 6 others. Now, in context, these colonists were angry about the Townshend Acts, a series of taxes imposed on the colonists by the British Crown. Although they never threatened them with violence, the colonists called them names and provoked them a lot, which caused the British to eventually open fire upon them. Now, this was terrorism because the colonists were unarmed and not facing a serious threat to the British, and the British opened fire on them in order to prove their point that they were serious about these taxes, and therefore they achieved something politically by doing this.
Okay, I get it now. Nat Turner's Rebellion, where a rebellion against the issue of slavery in the U.S. was held, killing many innocent whites and slave owners in Virginia. In America at this time, slaves were subjected to harsh treatment in the Cotton Belt area because of widespread success of the cash crops in America. Turner's Rebellion was considered terrorism because it was widely successful in planting fear in the hearts of Americans. Like modern terrorism, Turner's Rebellion spread hysteria among the masses.
Another terrorist act closely related to slavery was John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859, where the avid anti-slavery abolitionist initiated a slave rebellion in Virginia. He had hoped to get his message of strict anti-slavery across to the southern slave owners. John Brown was fed up with the way of peaceful abolitionism set up by people like Frederick Douglass and took it into his own hands to use violence to achieve his political aim of anti-slavery.
Next, in April of 1865, we have the killing of Abraham Lincoln. Now, this happened one afternoon in Ford's Theater when Lincoln and his wife were watching a play. Then a man named John Wilkes Booth walked in the theater and shot Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth was a Southern sympathizer, and he had very strong beliefs to have secession in the U.S. and keep slavery. This was terrorism because he used violence to achieve the aim of bringing his viewpoint to the stage in America, and he wanted to promote his beliefs about keeping slavery and secession.
Later on in U.S. history, in 1914, Archduke of Serbia, Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by the terrorist group the Black Hand. The Black Hand assassinated Franz Ferdinand because they believed that his assassination would display their message of uniting all of these South Slavic states under a non-majority rule by Serbia or Montenegro to the stage in Europe. This unfortunately had consequences leading to the result of World War I and the U.S. involvement in World War I.
In 1919, terrorism crept up again with the formation of the Red Scare, which was a nationwide fear of communism and radicalism, following numerous anarchist bombings in 1919. This led to the Palmer raids and the formation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. the Red Scare achieved its goals of pushing fear throughout the country of communism and radicalism.
In 1963, President JFK was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, an ex-Marine who defected from the Soviet Union. This defection labeled him as a communist sympathizer and American terrorist. In the midst of the Cold War against the communist Soviet Union, acts of terror like this demonstrated anarchist threats to America in hopes of creating fear of communism.
Next, a very significant act of domestic terrorism was committed in April 1968. This was the very famous assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. by James Earl Ray. This happened outside a King's motel room, and James Earl Ray did this because his white supremacist beliefs and his very strong opposition to equality of the blacks and just equality of all races and segregation, and desegregation. Now, after this, terrorism in the U.S. kind of got involved on a more global stage. This all began with the Iran hostage crisis. What happened here was the U.S. embassy in Iran was taken over, and the Americans, I think there were about 60 in there, were taken hostage by student followers of an association called the Imam's Line. So basically what happened is that these Iranians were very angry about the U.S.'s involvement in Iran. So these students, which were pretty radical because they were just students, teenagers, they took these people hostage for about a little more than a year. And now this was terrorism. Although this didn't happen in the U.S., it was on the U.S. Embassy, which is technically considered U.S. soil.
The most significant terrorist attack in United States history would be the actions committed by Al-Qaeda on September 11th of 2001. The terrorist group Al-Qaeda planned an attack that resulted in 2 planes flying into the World Trade Center, killing about 3,000 people and injuring many more. Other plans to attack the Pentagon failed, luckily, but still many Americans died that day. This changed many Americans' attitudes on immigration and security, as seen by the USA Patriot Act. And this led to the American involvement in Iraq, as seen by the Bush Doctrine of preemptive war.
Jeez, that sounds pretty important.
Yeah, man. This very sincere and emphatic message from President George W. Bush at that time really gets the message across about how important this event was.
We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
As America delves into the 21st century, we see a large spike in both global and domestic terrorism. Domestically, we see things like Dylan Roof's South Carolina Charleston shooting, where he shoots up a black church because of his white supremacist beliefs. Globally, we see things such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS forming, and ISIS beheading four American journalists such as James Foley because of America's continual involvement in the Middle East. Two major debates of this era are: number one, should we stop Muslim immigration to the U.S. to ensure that terrorist attacks do not happen in the U.S.? This can be seen by Mr. Donald Trump, who is very avid on restricting all Muslim immigration to the U.S. to stop radical Islamists from ISIS and Al-Qaeda from coming here and endangering America. This is very controversial because there are many good Muslims in America right now that are not terrorists and would be in danger if President Donald Trump became president and passed this. Second of all, there's the debate if we should go and destroy ISIS now or if we should wait for them to attack us. Some people think that they're strong now, and if we don't stop them now, they'll become much bigger and a much bigger threat. And some think that they're not capable of attacking us really, and we should just not waste our money on them.
Throughout American history, terrorism evolves from domestic terrorism through anti-British and anti-slavery sentiments by Americans to more international terrorist acts. As American foreign policy evolved from an isolationist standpoint to high involvement overseas, such as issues with communism and in the Middle East, terrorism organizations have had a large impact on American society.
Getting the hang of this one.
I know, I love terrorism! No!